There is a particular kind of automobile that exists not merely to transport, but to represent, a rolling embassy for a nation's sense of its own history, ambition, and craft. In the West, that role has long belonged to names like Rolls-Royce and Bentley, marques whose very badges carry the weight of monarchy and empire. In China, that role belongs to Hongqi, literally red flag, a name that has adorned the state cars of Chinese leadership since 1958. And within Hongqi's modern lineup, it is the H9 that carries this ceremonial inheritance forward into the 21st century, presenting itself quite unapologetically as an answer to the Mercedes-Maybach S-Class and the Rolls-Royce Ghost. The H9 first appeared in January of 2020, unveiled fittingly within Beijing's Great Hall of the People before reaching Chinese showrooms that August. A stretched variant, the H9 Plus, followed a year later, extending the wheelbase by some 230 mm to 3,290 mm for those buyers, often chauffeured executives and dignitaries, who value the rear cabin above all else. The standard H9 itself is no small car, 5,137 mm in length, 1,904 mm in width, and 1,493 mm in height, riding on a wheelbase of 3,060 mm. These are dimensions that place it comfortably in the company of a BMW 7 Series or a Cadillac CT6, and not far removed from the full-size territory once occupied by the Mercedes S-Class before the Maybach variant stretched things further still. The design language is where the H9 makes its most compelling argument for individuality. Rather than borrowing wholesale from European sensibilities, Hongqi's designers have drawn deliberately from Chinese architectural and artistic tradition. The front grille takes its inspiration from cascading waterfalls, bisected by a crimson line that anchors the brand's crest with quiet ceremony. Around the rear, the taillight graphics echo the ruyi, a traditional Chinese scepter symbolizing good fortune, while inside, the door panels carry motifs drawn from the flying apsaras, celestial figures found in centuries-old Buddhist cave paintings at Dunhuang. It is a car, in other words, that wears its cultural heritage as openly as a Rolls-Royce wears its spirit of ecstasy or a Bentley wears its winged badge, simply drawing from a different well of history entirely. Beneath that stately bodywork, the H9's construction leans heavily on substance rather than spectacle. The body in white is built from 86% high-strength steel, forming what Hongqi terms its 9H structure, a reference both to the model name and to the Mohs scale hardness rating suggesting near-diamond resilience, paired with 8 airbags as standard. This is a car engineered quite deliberately to feel reassuringly substantial at speed and impervious to the anxieties of lesser vehicles, in the same tradition that has always underpinned Bentley's and Rolls-Royce's approach to structural engineering, mass and rigidity treated not as compromises but as virtues. Power comes from one of two available configurations. The entry powertrain pairs a 20-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder with a 48-volt mild hybrid system, producing 252 horsepower and 273 pound-feet of torque, while the more assertive option employs a 3-liter supercharged V6, delivering 283 horsepower in its original form, a figure Hongqi raised to 333 horsepower following the April 2024 facelift, alongside the introduction of a smoother 8-speed automatic transmission in place of the earlier 7-speed dual-clutch unit. 0 to 100 km per hour arrives in roughly 7.8 seconds, with a governed top speed of around 230 km per hour or 143 miles per hour. These are figures not designed to trouble a Mercedes-AMG or a BMW M760, and the H9 does not pretend otherwise. This is a car engineered for serene, composed progress rather than outright theater, a philosophy shared by every long-wheelbase Rolls-Royce ever built. Inside, the H9 pursues that same philosophy of quiet opulence. Cabins are trimmed in high-quality leather and genuine wood veneer, with ambient lighting offering a genuinely remarkable 253 individual color configurations, a figure that eclipses even Mercedes-Maybach's celebrated ambient lighting suite. A 12.3-inch central touchscreen anchors the dashboard, while rear passengers in higher trims are treated to dual 12.3-inch entertainment displays, transforming the back seat into a private screening room reminiscent of a Bentley Mulsanne's rear theater configuration or the fold-down displays once offered in the Maybach S-Class. Technology extends to a comprehensive suite of driver assistance systems as standard: 360-degree camera monitoring, adaptive cruise control, lane keeping assistance, blind spot warning, and automatic emergency braking, equipment that arrives here as expected inclusion rather than costly option, a notable contrast to how German rivals have traditionally structured their options sheets. Pricing is perhaps the H9's most quietly disarming credential. In its home market, the H9 is offered from approximately 309,800 yuan and rising to 539,800 yuan for range-topping configurations, roughly $43,700 to $76,100 at current exchange rates. Export markets naturally command higher figures once shipping, duties, and local specification are factored in. Buyers in the United Arab Emirates will find the H9 priced from 214,900 AED, while United Kingdom pricing begins in the region of £60,000. Even at the top of its range, however, the H9 remains priced well below a comparably equipped Mercedes-Maybach S580, a Bentley Flying Spur, or naturally any Rolls-Royce Ghost, positioning it less as a direct competitor on prestige alone and more as a considered alternative for buyers who want the presence and ceremony of a flagship sedan without the price tag traditionally attached to that experience. Would you choose this over a Rolls-Royce or Mercedes-Maybach? Let us know in the comments below. The technological architecture underpinning the H9 deserves closer examination, particularly because it illustrates how quickly Chinese luxury manufacturing has closed the gap that once separated it decisively from Munich, Stuttgart, and Crewe. The central infotainment system, built around that 12.3-inch touchscreen, integrates voice recognition sophisticated enough to control climate, lighting, and navigation through natural spoken commands, a feature Mercedes has marketed heavily under its own MBUX branding, yet one Hongqi offers without the premium subscription tiers that increasingly accompany German infotainment ecosystems. Software updates arrive over the air, allowing the H9's driver assistance suite to improve incrementally without a dealership visit, a modern convenience that echoes Tesla's approach far more than it does traditional Chinese state car engineering. Bluetooth connectivity, 4 multimedia interface points, and a dedicated companion application for remote vehicle monitoring round out a technology package that feels, on balance, more contemporary than the segment's price point might suggest. Safety engineering extends well beyond the structural steel and airbag count mentioned earlier. The H9's driver assistance suite includes forward collision warning paired with automatic emergency braking capable of intervening at speeds up to 60 km per hour, lane departure warning working in concert with lane keeping assist, and a blind spot monitoring system supplemented by door opening warnings, a small but thoughtful touch designed to prevent the kind of low-speed collisions that occur when a rear passenger, accustomed to being chauffeured, opens a door into oncoming traffic without checking a mirror. Hill start assist, electronic stability control, and a 360-degree camera system with a genuinely useful around-view monitor complete a package that, on specification sheets alone, rivals what BMW and Mercedes offer on their own flagship sedans, even if independent crash test validation from bodies like Euro NCAP remains less extensive for the H9 than for its more established European counterparts, a point worth noting candidly for any prospective buyer weighing specification against verified third-party safety data. There is also the matter of customization and bespoke commissioning, an area where the established European marques have built entire cottage industries: Bentley's Mulliner division, Rolls-Royce's Bespoke Collective, Mercedes-Maybach's Manufacture Program. Hongqi's equivalent ambitions remain considerably more modest at present, though the brand has begun experimenting with limited-run special editions and expanded color and trim palettes for its flagship models, including two-tone exterior finishes that pair a gentian violet body with champion gold accents, a combination that leans unmistakably towards ceremonial grandeur rather than understated European reserve. It is not yet bespoke coach building in the Crewe or Mulsanne street tradition, but it does suggest a brand aware of what separates a merely well-equipped luxury sedan from one that offers genuine individuality to its owner. Positioned against its most obvious rivals, the H9's case becomes clearer still. Against the Mercedes-Maybach S480, which starts north of $180,000 in the United States before options, the H9's top-spec pricing near $76,000 domestically represents a difference that is difficult to ignore, even accounting for the gap in outright badge prestige and third-pedal engineering pedigree that decades of Stuttgart refinement still command. Against the Cadillac CT6, itself now discontinued in most markets, a fact that inadvertently underscores how few affordable flagship sedans remain in production at all, the H9 arguably occupies a niche increasingly abandoned by American luxury manufacturers in favor of SUVs. And against the BMW 7 Series, whose starting price comfortably exceeds $95,000 before options in most markets, the H9 offers comparable size, similar power in its uprated form, and arguably richer standard equipment, while conceding driving dynamics, brand cachet, and the intangible reassurance of a century-old dealer and service network that spans every continent. What the H9 ultimately represents, then, is not an attempt to dethrone Rolls-Royce, Bentley, or Mercedes-Maybach on their own terms. Heritage of that depth cannot be manufactured within a handful of decades, however capable the engineering beneath it. Rather, it represents a genuinely different proposition: ceremonial grandeur, generous technology, and flagship sedan presence offered at a fraction of the investment those Western marques require, for buyers willing to look beyond the traditional badges and consider what a nation's own idea of automotive prestige looks like when built without the constraints of matching a European price umbrella. Whether that proves persuasive to buyers currently weighing a ghost against a ghost's price tag remains to be seen, but the H9 has at minimum ensured that the conversation is now worth having. The story of Hongqi's own heritage adds a layer of gravity to the H9 that no purely commercial luxury brand, however storied, can quite replicate. Founded in 1958 to build China's first indigenous limousine for its national leadership, Hongqi's earliest models carried premiers and visiting heads of state through Tiananmen Square during state occasions, their long black bodies and red flag hood ornaments becoming over decades as much a symbol of the nation itself as any flag or emblem. The H9, in its design references, that Ruyi-inspired taillight signature, the waterfall grille, and the flying apsaris motif stitched into door panels, is not simply borrowing decorative flourishes at random. It is a deliberate act of continuity, tying a thoroughly modern executive sedan back to a lineage that predates even some of its European rivals' most celebrated post-war models. Where a Rolls-Royce Phantom trades on the mystique of British aristocracy, and a Mercedes-Maybach leans on Wilhelm Maybach's engineering pedigree, the H9 trades on something more explicitly civic: the idea of the state car as a shared national inheritance rather than a private indulgence. Interior material selection, examined closely, reveals a similar layered intent. Beyond the leather and genuine wood veneer already noted, higher trims of the H9 incorporate metal trim finished with a technique Hongqi calls vacuum-plated detailing, applied to switchgear and console surrounds to achieve a cool, substantial touchpoint that avoids the slightly hollow feel sometimes associated with chrome effect plastics in this price segment. Carpet and floor mat materials are notably dense, contributing to both cabin quietness and a subjective sense of solidity underfoot, a detail easy to overlook on a specification sheet, yet immediately noticeable to anyone stepping between an H9 and a rival costing considerably more. The stitching pattern across the dashboard and door cards follows a diamond-quilted motif in top trims, evoking, deliberately or not, the quilted leather long associated with Bentley's Mulliner-trimmed cabins, though executed at a manufacturing scale and price point Crew has never attempted to match. Lighting design, both exterior and interior, has become something of a signature battleground among modern luxury sedans, and the H9 competes here with genuine confidence. The Matrix LED headlights adjust beam pattern dynamically to avoid dazzling oncoming traffic while maintaining maximum illumination of the road ahead, a technology pioneered by Audi and Mercedes over the past decade, and now fully matched in the H9 specification. The Dream Wings running light signature, extending along the character line from headlight to mirror housing, creates a distinctive nighttime silhouette intended to make the H9 instantly recognizable in a way that matters enormously for ceremonial and diplomatic buyers, for whom visual identification at a glance carries genuine institutional value. Inside, that earlier mentioned 253-color ambient lighting system can be synchronized to music playback, adjusted by time of day, or set to a series of curated presets designed to evoke specific moods, a level of customization that, again, exceeds what most rivals in this price bracket offer as standard equipment, even if the underlying technology itself is not unique to Hongqi. Climate and air quality management deserves further attention beyond what was mentioned earlier, given its particular resonance for the H9's core Chinese buyer base. The multi-stage filtration system addresses not only particulate matter, but also volatile organic compounds released from interior materials themselves, a concern Chinese consumers have historically weighted more heavily than many Western buyers, following well-publicized controversies around cabin air quality in several mainstream Chinese market vehicles earlier in the 2010s. Hongqi's response has been to make air quality monitoring a visible, real-time feature displayed on the central touchscreen, allowing passengers to see filtration performance rather than simply trust manufacturer claims, a transparency-forward approach which, interestingly, few European luxury manufacturers have chosen to replicate, despite operating in markets where air quality concerns, while less acute, are far from absent. The question of how the H9 is actually received by the ceremonial and diplomatic community it was partly built to serve offers a revealing final measure of its success. Hongqi vehicles, the H9 included, have appeared in official state convoys and at diplomatic functions within China with increasing frequency since the model's launch in 2020, gradually displacing older Audi A6L and Volkswagen Phaeton models that had for years served as the default choice for Chinese government and corporate fleets. This institutional adoption matters enormously for long-term brand equity in a way that transcends ordinary consumer marketing. It signals, both domestically and to the world, that China's own automotive industry now considers itself capable of building vehicles worthy of representing the nation at its most formal occasions, a milestone that carries symbolic weight, extending well beyond the H9 specification sheet or its price relative to a Bentley flying spur. Looking toward the H9's future, Hongqi has signaled continued investment in the nameplate rather than treating it as a static flagship. Industry reporting around the April 2024 facelift suggested further updates are planned, potentially including a plug-in hybrid variant that would extend the model's relevance as Chinese emissions regulations tighten, and as domestic rivals like NIO and Voya push further into electrified flagship territory. Whether Hongqi chooses to pursue a fully electric H9 successor, following the path already taken by its own H9 SUV, or continues refining the current combustion hybrid architecture remains an open question, but the pace of investment suggests a brand unwilling to cede the ceremonial flagship segment to newer, more electrically ambitious domestic competitors without a fight. The matter of engine character deserves its own careful consideration because sound and sensation have always separated genuinely engineered luxury from merely competent transportation. The H9's 3-liter supercharged V6, in its uprated 333 horsepower form, produces a note that Hongqi's engineers have deliberately tuned toward the muted, distant hum favored by traditional limousine builders, rather than the theatrical crackle increasingly fashionable among performance luxury hybrids like the Mercedes-AMG S63. Under gentle throttle, cabin occupants hear almost nothing beyond a faint mechanical murmur, filtered further by active noise cancellation working through the audio system's speakers, technology borrowed conceptually from Bose and Bang & Olufsen systems fitted to far pricier German rivals. Push the accelerator firmly, and the supercharger's whine becomes audible without ever crossing into vulgarity, a restraint that feels intentional rather than accidental, consistent with a Marque whose entire identity rests on projecting composed authority rather than youthful aggression. Paint and finish quality merits equally close attention as well, particularly how frequently Chinese luxury manufacturing was, only a decade ago, dismissed by Western critics as derivative or unrefined. The H9's exterior finish is applied across multiple clear-coat layers, with flagship trims offering a genuine two-tone treatment, gentian violet paired with champion gold, as mentioned, but also more restrained combinations such as dark night black with subtle chrome detailing along the waistline and door sills. Panel gaps, an area where budget manufacturers historically betrayed their limitations, have narrowed considerably on post-2024 facelift models, now sitting within tolerances that would not embarrass a Genesis G90 or a Lexus LS, even if the very tightest fractions of a millimeter consistency still belongs to Bentley's Crew factory, where panel fitting remains partly a matter of skilled human judgment rather than robotic precision alone. It is worth situating the H9 against its domestic Chinese rivals as well, not merely its European and American reference points, because the flagship segment within China itself has become fiercely, fascinatingly competitive. NIO's ET9, an electric flagship unveiled more recently, pursues a considerably different philosophy: air suspension paired with rear-wheel steering and a battery swap infrastructure unique among luxury sedans anywhere in the world, positioning itself as a genuinely futurist alternative to the H9's more traditional combustion and hybrid approach. Voya's Zhu Guang, meanwhile, leans into dramatic styling and extended-range hybrid powertrains aimed at younger, more design-conscious executives. Against these newer domestic rivals, the H9 occupies something closer to the conservative ceremonial ground that a Bentley Mulsanne once held against a more avant-garde Tesla Model S, the reassuring, established choice rather than the disruptive one, a positioning that suits Hongqi's institutional and government clientele particularly well, even as it may read as comparatively old-fashioned to younger private buyers increasingly drawn to NIO and Voya's more radical propositions. Depreciation and resale value, an unglamorous but essential consideration for any serious buyer, tell a more complicated story than outright purchase price alone. Within China, the H9 benefits from strong institutional and corporate demand. A meaningful proportion of H9 sales serve government, state enterprise, and ceremonial fleet purposes, which tends to support steadier resale values than pure private market demand alone would generate. Export markets, however, remain considerably less predictable, with dealer networks still developing across Europe, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia. Resale values for the H9 outside its home market carry more uncertainty than for a Mercedes-Maybach or Bentley, both of which benefit from decades of established luxury infrastructure, specialist auction houses, and enthusiast communities that actively sustain values over time. A prospective export buyer should weigh this honestly. The H9 offers remarkable value at first purchase, but the long-term ownership curve remains, for now, a considerably less charted territory than its Western equivalents. Servicing and maintenance infrastructure follows a similar pattern. Within China, Hongqi maintains an extensive dealer and service network befitting FAW Group's decades-long manufacturing scale and government backing. Parts availability, technician training, and warranty support are all mature and well-resourced domestically. In the United Arab Emirates and other early export markets, Hongqi has invested deliberately in building comparable infrastructure, recognizing that a flagship sedan lives or dies on the confidence buyers feel about long-term ownership rather than showroom appeal alone. Warranty coverage in these markets typically extends across several years or a generous mileage allowance, broadly competitive with terms offered by BMW, Mercedes, and Cadillac, though buyers should always confirm current terms directly with regional dealers, as coverage details shift by market and model year more frequently than manufacturers' marketing materials always reflect. The matter of driving position and ergonomics, often overlooked in favor of headline specifications, rewards closer attention as well. The H9's front seats offer extensive power adjustment, including cushion length extension for taller drivers, a detail borrowed conceptually from Mercedes driver ergonomics research and one that a surprising number of nominally luxury sedans still omit. The steering wheel itself is trimmed in leather with wood effect inserts on higher trims, adjustable for both reach and rake, while the driver's digital instrument cluster offers multiple configurable display modes, ranging from a traditional dual-dial layout evoking classical Hongqi models of the 1960s and 1970s to a more contemporary minimalist arrangement favored by younger executive buyers. This dual approach, honoring heritage styling cues while offering thoroughly modern configurability, recurs throughout the H9's cabin and represents, arguably, Hongqi's most successful design achievement, a car that manages to feel simultaneously historical and current, without either quality undermining the other. Finally, it is worth considering what the H9 signals about the broader trajectory of Chinese luxury manufacturing beyond the specifics of this one model. A decade ago, the notion of a Chinese flagship sedan drawing serious cross-shopping comparison with Rolls-Royce, Bentley, and Mercedes-Maybach would have struck most Western automotive journalists as, at best, aspirational marketing rather than genuine market reality. The H9, whatever its remaining gaps in global service infrastructure and brand cachet, has narrowed that gap in ways that deserve honest acknowledgement rather than reflexive skepticism. It will not, in the immediate term, draw meaningful numbers of buyers away from Crewe or Sindelfin showrooms in London, New York, or Munich. But within its home market, and increasingly across the Middle East and parts of Southeast Asia, it has already established itself as a credible flagship, proof that the ceremonial, ultra-refined sedan segment, long assumed to be a permanent European and American preserve, now has a genuinely serious Chinese contender competing on its own terms.
Ride quality is where the H9 reveals just how seriously Hongqi has studied its European reference points. The suspension employs double wishbone geometry at the front axle, paired with a multi-link arrangement at the rear, tuned deliberately towards absorption and isolation rather than any pretense of sporting agility. Over broken tarmac and expansion joints, the cabin settles into a hushed, almost ceremonial calm, the sort of composure one associates with a chauffeur gliding through a state motorcade, rather than an owner-driver chasing apexes. It will not corner with the eagerness of a BMW 7 Series, nor does it try to. Instead, the H9 pursues the same target that has guided Rolls-Royce's engineers for a century, the sensation that the road itself has been smoothed in advance of the car's arrival. Wind and road noise are kept admirably distant at highway speed, aided by acoustic glazing and dense sound deadening throughout the floor and firewall. Refinements that place the H9's cabin serenity closer to a Bentley flying spur than to anything in its price bracket ought reasonably to achieve. The rear cabin, naturally, is where the H9 makes its most emphatic case, particularly in long-wheelbase H9 Plus skies. Rear seats offer power-adjustable recline, ventilation, and heating, with the range-topping configuration adding calf rests and a business-class style footrest for the rear right passenger, the traditional seat of honor in any chauffeured Chinese luxury sedan, a detail that speaks to cultural fluency rather than mere feature checking. A refrigerated console box sits between the rear seats and top trims, chilling beverages for passengers much as a Mercedes-Maybach or Rolls-Royce Ghost Extended would offer through its own rear console theater. Air quality filtration, a feature that has taken on particular significance for luxury buyers in Chinese and broader Asian markets, includes multi-stage purification designed to scrub particulates before they ever reach the passenger compartment, a quiet but meaningful point of differentiation from many Western rivals, for whom air quality has historically been a lower engineering priority. Practicality, too, benefits from the H9's generous footprint. Boot space comfortably accommodates luggage for extended journeys, and the cabin's width, 1,904 millimeters overall, translates into genuine shoulder room for 3 rear passengers, rather than the nominal 5th seat many rivals offer more in specification sheets than in lived comfort. The turning circle, inevitably, reflects the scale of the car. This is not a vehicle suited to tight urban parking structures or narrow historic streets, any more than a Bentley Mulsanne or long-wheelbase S-Class would be. But for its intended purpose, sweeping boulevards, airport transfers, and the measured pace of ceremonial and executive transport, the H9's dimensions work entirely in its favor, lending it the kind of visual authority that a smaller sedan simply cannot manufacture. Ownership of a Hongqi H9 remains, for now, a distinctly regional experience outside of China, the Middle East, and select emerging export markets, with dealer networks still comparatively thin across Europe and absent altogether in North America. This is perhaps the H9's most significant limitation when weighed against the Rolls-Royces, Bentleys, and Maybachs it invites comparison with.
Those marques offer not merely a car, but a century-deep infrastructure of servicing, bespoke commissioning, and brand heritage that Hongqi, however accomplished its engineering, has not yet had the decades required to replicate globally. Resale values outside China remain largely untested, and buyers considering the H9 in export markets should weigh enthusiasm for its considerable value proposition against the practical realities of parts availability and specialist servicing in their region. Within China itself, however, the calculus shifts considerably. Hongqi enjoys both extensive dealer coverage and a level of national symbolism that arguably exceeds even Mercedes or BMW's standing among status-conscious buyers, given the marque's direct lineage to state occasion vehicles. What emerges, taken as a whole, is a car of genuine and specific ambition rather than mere imitation. The H9 does not attempt to outperform a BMW 7 Series, nor does it chase the tactile artisanship that still, for now, separates a Bentley Mulliner commission from anything built at scale. What it offers, instead, is something more difficult to manufacture than horsepower or hand-stitched leather alone. A coherent cultural identity expressed through design language, material choice, and ceremonial intent, delivered at a price that undercuts its Western rivals by a considerable margin. Whether that proves sufficient to draw serious cross-shopping attention away from Stuttgart, Crewe, and Goodwood remains an open question, one that will likely be answered not in showrooms, but in the slower, more deliberate court of global reputation, the same court in which every luxury marque, eventually, must prove itself.